Welcome back to Sleep-Bound Secrets. Dim the lights, settle in, and let these stories carry you into the night. The car in the rear view. The high beams were blinding. No matter how many times I glanced into the mirror, they were still there. Two harsh white circles drilling into my vision. I was on an empty stretch of highway outside Kansas, the kind of road that felt abandoned by everyone except long-haul truckers and restless shadows. Midnight had come and gone, and I still had 2 hours to go before reaching the motel I'd booked near the state line. The highway was dead quiet, except for that car behind me. At first, I didn't think much of it. A lone car on a late-night road wasn't strange. What unsettled me was that no matter how fast or slow I drove, the car behind me matched my speed exactly. I tapped the brakes lightly, pretending I was slowing down to let them pass. But they didn't. They just hung there, hovering in my rear view like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. The road stretched on for miles, and the only sound was the hum of my tires against the asphalt. My hands tightened on the wheel. I told myself I was being paranoid. People drove strangely sometimes. It didn't mean anything sinister. But then the car surged forward suddenly, pulling close enough that I could see the outline of its hood. Too close. The beam spilled into my car, washing the inside of the cabin in stark white light. My heartbeat quickened. "All right," I muttered to myself, "enough of this." I eased my car onto the shoulder, flicking on my hazards, pretending maybe I had to check something. If they weren't following me, they'd just drive past. But the car pulled onto the shoulder, too. I froze. Both of us sat there, engines idling, twin hazards blinking into the dark. Seconds stretched like hours. I couldn't see the driver. The windshield was black. Then, as if nothing was strange at all, the car's headlights cut out, and mine were the only ones left burning on that desolate highway. I didn't wait. I slammed my car back into drive and sped off, tires kicking up gravel. My chest was tight, every nerve screaming at me to get as far away as possible. The road was straight for the next mile. I pushed the speedometer past 80. My eyes darted to the mirrors, scanning for headlights. For a while, there was nothing but the endless stretch of asphalt and the red glow of my taillights against the dark. Relief began to settle in, until the beams reappeared. Not gradually, like a car catching up, no. They flicked on behind me, as though the car had been there the whole time, just waiting in the dark. I nearly choked on my own breath. They were closer this time, maybe only 30 feet behind me, swaying slightly, as though the driver wanted me to know they were in control. I gripped the wheel tighter, eyes darting to the GPS on my phone. The next exit wasn't for another 12 miles. Too far. The car stayed on me. If I sped up, so did they. If I eased off, they adjusted. Their lights bored into me relentlessly, a hunter's gaze fixed on prey. Minutes crawled by, each second filled with a creeping dread that settled into my bones. Then, suddenly, the lights vanished again. I blinked hard, leaning forward, scanning the mirrors. Nothing. No headlights, no car. Just me on the empty road. I couldn't explain it. There had been no turn-offs, no side roads. It was as if the car had melted into the night. I should have felt relief, but the silence was suffocating. I kept driving, my hands shaking against the steering wheel. Every shadow at the edge of the road seemed alive. When I finally reached the next exit, I didn't care where it led. I veered off the highway, pulling into the first gas station I saw. The place was deserted, except for one clerk behind the counter scrolling through his phone. My car was the only one at the pumps. I got out, legs unsteady, needing the grounding feeling of standing on solid ground. The cool night air filled my lungs, but it didn't bring comfort. That's when I noticed the damp spots on the back of my car. 4 perfect, wet handprints smeared across the trunk, like someone had been holding on. The Vanishing Hitchhiker. The rain was relentless that night, the kind that blurred the world into streaks of silver and shadow. I had been driving for nearly 5 hours, eyelids heavy, wipers struggling to keep up. The highway stretched endlessly through the dark forests of Oregon, and the loneliness of the road pressed in on me like a weight. That's when I saw her. A figure standing on the shoulder, illuminated briefly by the sweep of my headlights. A young woman in a pale dress, soaked through, her arm raised as though she were desperately trying to wave me down. I hesitated. Every instinct screamed, "Don't stop." But the thought of leaving someone stranded in weather like this gnawed at me. She looked cold, fragile, almost translucent against the storm. So I slowed, pulling onto the shoulder. My hazard lights clicked in steady rhythm, the only sound besides the hammering rain. She approached slowly, her steps oddly deliberate, like each one took effort. When she reached my passenger side, I leaned over and unlocked the door. Up close, I could see her better. Her skin was pale, her hair clung wetly to her cheeks, and her lips trembled as though she had been out there for hours. "Thank you," she whispered, voice barely audible over the rain. She slid into the seat, dripping water onto the fabric. She kept her hands folded tightly in her lap, eyes fixed on the dashboard. "Where you headed?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Home," she murmured. "Just home." Her tone was hollow, but I didn't press. I pulled back onto the road, the car filling with the damp, earthy scent of rain, and something else, something faintly metallic. For several minutes we drove in silence. She never looked at me, never glanced out the window, just stared straight ahead. I began to notice strange details. Her dress, though drenched, looked old-fashioned, like something out of a different decade. Her bare feet were caked in mud. I wanted to ask more, but the words stuck in my throat. Finally, I mustered the courage. "Where's home?" She slowly turned her head toward me. Her eyes were glassy, unfocused, as though she were looking through me. "Just a little further," she said. Her voice carried a weight that made the hair on my arms stand up. I nodded and kept driving. The road twisted through dense forest, no signs of towns or houses anywhere. I checked the GPS, nothing but miles of wilderness ahead. That's when the temperature inside the car dropped. A chill spread through the cabin, sharp enough that I could see my breath. My fingers tightened on the wheel. I glanced at her. She was still staring forward, but her lips were moving soundlessly, whispering something I couldn't catch. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice cracking. She didn't respond. Then, as the headlights swept around a curve, I saw it. A small bridge crossing a rushing creek, half hidden by trees. The moment we reached it, she suddenly spoke, louder this time. "Here!" I slowed, confused. There was no house, no driveway, just the bridge and the roaring water below. "Here?" I echoed. She turned to face me fully, and for the first time I saw her expression. Her eyes were wide with sorrow, her lips trembling as though she were holding back tears. "Thank you," she whispered again. And then she was gone. Not like she got out of the car, not like she faded slowly. One moment she was sitting there, soaked and shivering. The next, nothing. The seat was empty. I slammed the brakes, heart pounding, pulling onto the shoulder just past the bridge. The car was silent except for the thrum of the engine and the pounding rain. My passenger seat was dry, completely dry. I scrambled out into the storm, rain soaking me instantly. I ran to the bridge, leaning over the railing. The creek below churned violently, swollen with rainwater. And that's when I saw it. At the edge of the water, tangled among the rocks, was the wreckage of an old car, rusted, half buried by years of floods and debris. Through the rain and shadows, I thought I could make out the pale glint of a door, twisted and broken. I backed away, trembling, my mind racing. Later, when I stopped at a diner an hour down the road, I asked the locals about the bridge. The waitress, an older woman with a knowing look, paused before answering. "Car accident," she said finally. "Happened decades ago. Young woman driving home one night, lost control in the rain. They didn't find her until days later. Folks around here say sometimes she still tries to hitch a ride, hoping someone will take her home." Her words sent ice through me. And when I walked back to my car, drenched and exhausted, I noticed something on the passenger seat. A single wet footprint.
The truck that wouldn't pass. The stretch of highway between Amarillo and Albuquerque feels endless at night. It's just miles of desert, broken only by the occasional gas station or rusted road sign. That's where I found myself one summer night, driving home after visiting family. I had 6 hours ahead of me, and the silence of the desert pressed against my car like a heavy blanket. At first, I thought I was completely alone out there. No headlights ahead, no taillights in the distance, just me and the black ribbon of road unraveling beneath the tires. But then, a pair of lights appeared in my rear view. It was a truck, a massive one, boxy, with glaring high beams that filled my mirrors. I figured it was just another driver pushing through the night like me. I moved over slightly, expecting him to pass. He didn't. Instead, the truck pulled close, too close. His lights poured into my car, burning into the back of my eyes. I sped up, but he matched me. I slowed down, he slowed too. The engine of the truck growled in the distance, like some beast stalking me just out of reach. I told myself it was coincidence, but my knuckles tightened around the wheel. 10 minutes passed. He never tried to overtake me. He just hovered there, far too close for comfort. The road curved slightly, and I used the moment to signal right, pulling on to the shoulder. Maybe he'd just roar past. But the truck slowed with me. We both sat there for a beat, me in my little sedan, him towering behind me, his headlights blinding. Then, with a hiss of brakes, his lights flicked off. I was left in total darkness. My breath caught. I could hear my own pulse hammering in my ears. Every instinct screamed at me to drive. So I did. I gunned it, pulling back onto the highway, tires spitting gravel. For a moment, there was nothing behind me, just the yawning desert. Then, his lights came back on. They didn't fade in from the distance. They flared to life directly behind me, as if he'd been there the whole time, tailing me in the dark. I floored the accelerator, heart in my throat. The speedometer climbed past 80, then 90. My little car rattled with the effort, but the truck stayed locked onto me, unwavering. I passed an exit sign, 20 miles to the next town, too far. The truck's engine roared, and suddenly it surged forward, pulling so close I thought he'd ram me. My whole car shook under the pressure of his headlights. I gripped the wheel so tight my palms ached. Then, just as suddenly, he dropped back. It became a cruel game. He'd fall behind, then lurch forward, testing how close he could get without touching me. Each time I thought he'd slam into me, my stomach dropped into my shoes. I tried calling the police, fumbling for my phone, but there was no signal. Nothing but empty bars mocking me. Minutes dragged like hours. Finally, I spotted the faint glow of a gas station sign ahead, the first in nearly 50 miles. Hope surged through me. I veered off the highway, heart hammering, pulling straight into the lot. The place was mostly empty, save for a single parked pickup and a flickering neon sign buzzing above the convenience store. I killed the engine and leapt out, sprinting toward the store. The clerk looked up, startled, as I pushed through the door, breathless. There's a truck," I stammered. "It's been following me, right on me, for miles." The clerk's eyes flicked past me, toward the lot. I spun around. The highway was empty. No truck, no headlights, nothing. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone. Signal bars finally blinked to life. I called the local sheriff's office, explaining everything in a rush. When the deputy arrived 20 minutes later, he listened patiently, jotting down details. I told him about the truck's lights, the way it tailed me, the game of speeding up and falling back. He nodded slowly, then asked, "Did you notice anything about the truck? Markings? License plate?" I shook my head. Too dark. Just big and loud, like an old diesel. The deputy exchanged a look with the clerk, then sighed. "You're not the first," he said finally. "We've had reports over the years, always out on that stretch of highway, late at night. Folks say a big rig follows them, playing games, scares the hell out of them. When they finally stop somewhere safe, it's just gone." He paused, lowering his voice. "Thing is, about 20 years back, there was a trucker who ran that road. Mean bastard. Liked to mess with smaller cars, tailgate 'em, box 'em in, scare the daylights out of people. One night, he pushed it too far, clipped a sedan, sent it spinning off the road. Whole family killed. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. Truck went off the road too. Driver burned up in the wreck. They say his rig still prowls the highway sometimes, looks for folks to toy with. I wanted to laugh it off, to call it a campfire story, but when I finally walked back out to my car, I saw it. On my bumper, faint in the dust and dirt, were the smears of two massive headlights, perfectly round, burned into the paint like scars.
The Woman on Route 191. They say the desert has ghosts. I used to laugh at that, until the night I drove through Arizona, alone, with nothing but the moon and my headlights guiding me. It was a little after midnight when I turned off the interstate and onto Route 191, a desolate two-lane road that stretched into the mountains. I'd taken it before, shorter than the main highway, but rough, twisting, and nearly abandoned after dark. That night, it was just me and the road. Or so I thought. I first saw her at the edge of the highway, standing in the gravel shoulder as if waiting for someone. A young woman, pale in the headlights, dressed in an old-fashioned white dress that shimmered faintly as I passed. At 65 miles per hour, I barely had time to register her face, but something about it burned into me. Wide, unblinking eyes, lips slightly parted as though she'd been about to speak. I craned my neck to look in the rear view. She was gone. No car, no hitchhiker, just blackness. The hair rose on my arms. I told myself I'd imagined her. Maybe fatigue, maybe shadows. But then, less than a mile down the road, I saw her again. Standing by the shoulder, waiting. This time, I hit the brakes. My tires squealed as I slowed, staring wide-eyed. It was the same woman, same white dress, same unblinking stare. Only now, she was smiling. I pressed harder on the gas. The car lurched forward, the road whipping under me as I pushed past 70. My heart thundered in my chest, every nerve screaming that I was running from something I couldn't explain. For the next 5 miles, I didn't dare look in the mirrors. I kept my eyes locked ahead. The mountains loomed darker, the road tightening into curves, and I forced my mind to believe I was alone. But then, my headlights caught her again. This time, she wasn't on the shoulder. She was standing in the middle of the road. I swerved violently, tires shrieking, nearly clipping the guardrail. My car fishtailed before straightening. In the rear view, my lights briefly illuminated her standing exactly where I'd seen her, unchanged, untouched, her pale face watching me vanish around the bend. Panic clawed at my chest. I wanted to turn back, to take the long highway, but the road left me no choice but forward. The curves were sharp, the drop-offs steep. Stopping wasn't an option. That's when I heard it. A faint sound beneath the hum of the engine. Breathing. It wasn't mine. The car that wouldn't pass. It was late autumn in Oregon, the kind of night where fog clings low to the asphalt and headlights look like pale orbs cutting tunnels through the mist. I was driving home from a friend's place, about a 90-minute ride through winding, wooded back roads that barely saw traffic after dark. At first, it felt peaceful, trees arching overhead like a cathedral, the hum of the tires steady, the fog rolling in slow waves. But somewhere past the halfway mark, I noticed headlights behind me. Not unusual, but what made me uneasy was how close they were. The car had appeared out of nowhere, pulling up on my bumper within seconds. I slowed slightly, giving them the chance to pass, but they didn't. Instead, they matched me, inch for inch, their beams flooding my mirrors. I told myself not to panic. Rural roads brought out impatient drivers all the time. Still, the way this one hovered, never pulling ahead, never falling back, sent a prickle down my neck. 10 minutes passed, still there. I tried speeding up, so did they. I braked slightly, they braked too. No matter what I did, the car behind me mirrored it perfectly, headlights burning into the back of my skull. By now, the fog had thickened. The road twisted tighter, climbing into the hills, and the idea of pulling over felt dangerous, too isolated, too easy to be cornered. My chest tightened. I turned up the radio just to break the silence in the cabin, but it didn't help. Every glance at the mirror showed the same thing, those twin beams, impossibly close. Finally, after what felt like forever, a small gas station appeared on the right, a flickering neon open sign, the first sign of civilization in 20 miles. I pulled in. The other car slowed, then kept going. Its headlights melted back into the fog, vanishing as if they'd never been there. Relief poured through me, weak and shaky. I parked by the pumps and sat for a moment, breathing hard. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe some jerk just wanted to mess with me. But then, as I reached for my wallet to head inside, movement caught my eye. In the reflection of the convenience store's glass window, I saw headlights. Behind me. I whipped around. Nothing. Just empty road, the fog pressing close. My heart stuttered. I rubbed my eyes, trying to convince myself I was just jumpy. I went inside, bought a coffee, tried to shake it off. When I came back out, my stomach dropped. There, parked in the shadows at the far end of the lot, was the same car. Dark-colored sedan, lights off, just sitting there, watching. I climbed into my car, hands trembling, and started the engine. I waited, hoping maybe it was coincidence, but as I pulled back onto the road, the sedan rolled out too. My pulse pounded in my ears. For the next 20 minutes, it was a sickening game of shadow. Every turn I made, they made. Every acceleration, every slowdown, they were always there. Never close enough to force my hand, never far enough to lose sight. Finally, I reached a stretch of road I knew well. It wound sharply through the hills before splitting at a fork, left toward the highway, right deeper into the woods. I floored it, speeding into the curves, tires squealing, praying the fog wouldn't blind me. At the fork, I made a sudden right, my tires screaming as I tore down the wooded road. I killed my headlights. My car rolled to a crawl, almost blind, as I pulled into a gravel turnout and cut the engine.
I sat in silence, heart hammering, breath shallow. Seconds stretched into minutes. And then I heard it. The low growl of an engine creeping past. The sedan. Its lights were off, but I saw its silhouette in the mist, slowly, methodically, moving down the road I'd just left. I didn't breathe, didn't move. My hands dug into the steering wheel so hard they cramped. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the sound faded. The car disappeared into the fog. I waited another 10 minutes before daring to move. When I finally pulled back onto the road, I didn't see them again. But the image of that car, crawling silently with its lights off, still sticks with me. Whoever they weren't just another driver. They were hunting. And for one long night, I was the prey.
The rest stop, stranger. The interstate was dead quiet that night, the kind of silence that feels heavier than noise. I'd been driving for hours through the Midwest, trying to make it home before sunrise, when the caffeine wore off and exhaustion hit me like a wall. I knew I couldn't keep my eyes open much longer. That's when I saw the sign, Rest Area, 1 mile. The lot was nearly empty when I pulled in. A few semis idled at the far end, their engines rumbling like distant thunder. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering occasionally, casting the whole place in a sickly pale glow. I parked under one of them, figuring the extra light might make me feel safer. Inside the rest stop, the air smelled faintly of disinfectant and something stale. The vending machines hummed. The bathroom echoed with every drip of a faucet. I splashed water on my face, trying to shake off the drowsiness. When I stepped back outside, that's when I noticed him. A man, standing by the vending machines. I hadn't seen him go in, hadn't heard him. He was just there. Tall, thin, wearing a dark hoodie with the hood up. He stood unnaturally still, his hands shoved in the pockets, his face hidden in shadow. I tried not to stare, but unease crawled up my spine. I headed for my car, telling myself not to be paranoid. People stop at rest areas all the time. But as I unlocked my door, I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, echoing across the pavement. I glanced back. The man was walking toward me now. Not fast, not running, just closing the distance with steady, unnerving steps. "Can I help you?" I called out, my voice sharper than I intended. No answer. He kept walking. Panic spiked in my chest. I slid into my car, slammed the lock, and started the engine. My headlights flared on, and for the first time I saw his face, or what little of it wasn't shadowed. Expressionless, eyes fixed directly on me. I threw the car into reverse and backed out fast. The man didn't chase me, didn't run. He just stopped where he was, standing there in the glare of my headlights, watching. I pulled onto the highway, heart racing, constantly checking the mirrors. Nothing, just empty asphalt stretching behind me. For the next 30 miles, I tried to convince myself I was overreacting.
Maybe he was just another traveler. Maybe he meant nothing by it. But then, headlights. Far back at first, then closer. A dark-colored car steadily gaining on me. My stomach turned cold. I pressed harder on the gas. So did they. The same cat and mouse I'd feared. Every lane change I made, they mirrored. Every speed adjustment, they matched. By now, it was nearly 3 a.m., the highway empty, my chest pounding. I didn't know what to do. Pulling over felt like suicide. Finally, I spotted an exit with a 24-hour truck stop. I swerved off, heart hammering, and pulled into the bright lot crowded with semis. The car behind me followed at first, then slowed. It lingered at the edge of the lot for a moment, its headlights washing over the pavement. And then, just as my nerves were ready to snap, it turned back onto the highway and disappeared into the night. I sat there for nearly an hour, gripping the wheel, surrounded by the safety of other drivers, truckers climbing in and out of cabs, life going on as if nothing had happened. But when I finally pulled back onto the interstate, the fear stayed with me. Because I can't shake the thought. If I hadn't stopped at that truck stop, if I'd kept driving, how long would that car have followed me? And what would have happened when I was finally too tired to keep my eyes open?
The truck with no driver. The desert highway stretched out endlessly, two faded lanes slicing through a wasteland of rock and scrub. Midnight had passed hours ago, and by now the world outside my windshield felt unreal. Flat blackness above, endless asphalt below, and nothing but the steady hum of my rig to prove I was still moving. I'd been driving freight across Nevada for years, but nights like this had a way of turning the road into something otherworldly. There's no cell signal out here, no towns, no headlights for miles. Just you, your truck, and the kind of silence that starts to feel alive. That's when I saw it. Headlights. Far back at first, then growing closer. I wasn't expecting another vehicle this late, not on this stretch. But sure enough, a set of high beams was charging up behind me, far too fast for comfort. I checked my mirrors. It was an 18-wheeler, big, black, the kind that dwarfs even my rig. The way it was bearing down made my stomach clench. Truckers know better than to tailgate, especially out here. But this one didn't care. Within seconds, the thing was riding my bumper, its lights flooding my mirrors, making it impossible to see. I slowed, so did it. I sped up, it matched. Every move I made, the truck mirrored me, staying just a few feet behind, close enough I could almost feel the rumble of its engine. I reached for the CB, called out on every channel. "Hey, driver, you want to back it up? You're way too close." Nothing but static. I tried again, still silence. Then I noticed something that made the hair on my arms rise. Through the glare of the headlights, I couldn't see anyone in the cab, not even a shadow. I gripped the wheel tighter, heart thudding. Trucks don't drive themselves. Not out here, not in the middle of the desert. I decided to pull off at the next turnout, let the maniac pass. But when I slowed and veered onto the shoulder, the black truck slowed too, keeping right behind me. Fine, I thought, I'll stop completely. I brought my rig to a halt. For the first time in miles, the desert was still. The truck behind me stopped too. Its headlights bore into my mirrors, unwavering. Minutes passed. Neither of us moved. I considered climbing out, marching back there, demanding to know what the hell was going on. But something deep in my gut screamed, "Don't."
So I pulled back onto the road. The truck followed. This dance went on for nearly 20 miles, my nerves fraying with every turn of the wheels. Finally, I saw salvation, a tiny diner glowing in the distance, the kind that stays open all night for people like me. I swung into the lot, gravel crunching under my tires. The black truck didn't follow. Instead, as soon as I turned off the highway, it roared past, no hesitation, no driver visible, just a blur of steel and headlights, gone into the desert night. Inside the diner, I ordered coffee, hands still shaking. The waitress, an older woman with tired eyes, noticed. "Rough night?" she asked. I told her about the truck, how it tailed me for miles, how I couldn't see a driver. Her face changed. "You saw him?" she whispered. I frowned. "Who?" She glanced around the empty diner before leaning closer. Years back, a trucker died out there, fell asleep at the wheel, jackknifed his rig, and burned up before anyone could pull him out. Folks say his truck still runs that highway, chasing down anyone unlucky enough to be on the road alone. I wanted to laugh it off, but something in her voice told me she wasn't joking. "Did anyone ever see him stop?" I asked. She shook her head slowly. "No, he only follows until he doesn't." I sat there, staring into my coffee, trying to convince myself it was just exhaustion, just a trick of the lights. But as I got back into my rig and pulled away from the diner, I couldn't help glancing at my mirrors every few seconds, half expecting to see those high beams charging up behind me again. And even now, years later, whenever I drive through that stretch of desert, I still feel it. That heavy silence, that lingering dread. Like I'm not really alone out there.
The hitchhiker that knew my name. The road was endless, the kind of late-night stretch where the world narrows to just the glow of your headlights and the steady rhythm of tires against pavement. It was early winter, the kind of cold that seeped through the windows no matter how high you cranked the heat. I was halfway home from visiting my parents, driving alone on a back highway to shave off an hour. No towns, no gas stations, just black forest pressing in on both sides. That's when I saw him. A figure standing by the shoulder, thumb out, silhouetted in my headlights.
Normally, I don't pick up hitchhikers, but something about the night, the loneliness of it, the bitter cold, made me hesitate. The man wore only a thin jacket, jeans stiff from frost. He looked desperate. I slowed. Against my better judgment, I stopped. He climbed in without a word, closing the door gently behind him. The air filled with the sharp scent of cold earth, like damp leaves and wet stone. "Where you headed?" I asked, forcing cheer into my voice. "North," he murmured. His voice was soft, almost musical. I nodded, kept my eyes on the road. Silence stretched between us. Normally, passengers fidget, clear their throats, shift in their seats. This man sat perfectly still, hands folded on his lap, eyes fixed forward. After a few miles, I tried again. "You from around here?" He didn't answer. Instead, he turned his head, slowly, and smiled. That's when he said it. My name. Not just my first name, my full name. I froze. My knuckles tightened around the wheel. "Excuse me?" He repeated it, spoke it softly, like he was savoring it. Then he began to list details, things he couldn't possibly know. My address, my birthday, my mother's maiden name. The more he spoke, the colder the car seemed to get. My breath fogged inside the cabin, though the heater was on full blast. I forced a laugh, tried to brush it off. "How do you know all that?" He didn't answer, just smiled wider, eyes glinting in the dim light. The silence returned, heavier than before. My mind raced. Had he stolen my wallet somehow? Looked me up online? No, I still had everything. My phone, my bag. None of this made sense. I gripped the wheel tighter, heart hammering, when I realized something else. He hadn't buckled his seatbelt. And yet, no matter how the car moved, turns, bumps, sudden brakes, he never shifted. Not an inch. Like he wasn't entirely there. I swallowed hard. My exit was coming up soon. The thought of him knowing where I lived made bile rise in my throat. So, I did something reckless. Without warning, I pulled over, slamming the car into park. "You need to get out," I said, my voice trembling. The man just stared at me, that eerie smile never fading. "You need to get out now," I repeated, louder. For a long, unbearable moment, he didn't move. Then, finally, he opened the door. But instead of stepping onto the road, he leaned closer, his face inches from mine. "I'll see you soon." Then he was gone. I don't mean he stepped out and shut the door. I mean he was gone. The passenger seat was empty. The door never opened. There was no sound, no movement, just the hollow silence of the forest pressing in. I sat there, shaking, headlights cutting into the trees. Eventually, I forced myself to drive again, all the way home, every nerve screaming. When I reached my driveway, I sat in the car for nearly an hour, too afraid to go inside, too afraid to check the passenger seat again. I told myself it was exhaustion, a hallucination from the road. But sometimes, late at night, I wake to the sound of my phone buzzing. No caller ID. When I answer, there's only silence. And then, softly, a voice whispering my name.
The stoplight stranger. It was raining hard that night, the kind of storm where water smeared the windshield faster than the wipers could clear. I was the only car on Main Street, crawling home through sheets of rain when the light ahead turned red. I slowed to a stop. That's when I noticed the figure. He was standing at the corner, soaked through, head tilted down so I couldn't see his face. At first, I thought nothing of it, just someone caught in the storm. But the longer I sat there, the stranger it felt, because he wasn't moving, not an inch, not shivering, not shifting, not even blinking against the rain, just standing there, head bowed, facing the intersection. The light stayed red, the storm pounded, and with every passing second, my unease grew. Then, slowly, the figure lifted his head and smiled. Not a friendly smile, not a desperate one, but a wide, frozen grin that cut across his face like a wound. Lightning flashed, and in that split-second glow, I saw his eyes. They weren't reflecting light. They were glowing. The breath caught in my throat. My hands clenched the wheel. I wanted to drive through the red, storm be damned, but my body wouldn't move. That's when I realized he wasn't outside anymore. He was standing by the passenger side window. Close enough I could see the rain dripping from his hair, close enough that his smile pressed against the glass. I slammed my foot down on the gas, tires screeching as I tore through the red light. The car fishtailed, rain spraying, my heart hammering so hard I thought I'd pass out. I didn't look back, couldn't. I drove until the storm gave way to silence, until the streets blurred into empty neighborhoods. Only then did I finally glance at the mirror. The passenger seat was empty, but faint in the fogged-up window, written by an unseen hand, were two words: "See you." The last ride. The road always felt different at night. I'd driven that stretch of highway 100 times in daylight. Farms rolling by, small-town diners with neon signs, the occasional gas station. But at midnight, the landscape shifted into something unrecognizable. Just darkness pressing at the glass, headlights swallowed whole, and the endless hum of tires keeping rhythm with my heartbeat. I had been driving 6 hours straight. My eyelids grew heavy, and the air inside the car was stale. A cup of gas station coffee cooled in the cup holder, untouched since I'd bought it an hour earlier. That's when I saw it. A pair of taillights in the distance. It shouldn't have felt strange, but it did. I hadn't seen another car in almost 40 minutes. Out here, in the middle of nowhere, you start to feel like the last person alive. But now, there it was, a faint red glow bobbing along the horizon. Relieved, I pressed a little harder on the gas. Maybe catching up to them would break the spell of the lonely road. But something was off. The car ahead seemed wrong. Its lights wavered in the darkness as though the vehicle were swaying too much for the speed it was going.
When I finally drew closer, the details came into view. An old sedan, maybe from the 70s, paint dull, body rusting. The kind of car you'd expect to see abandoned in a junkyard, not gliding effortlessly down a midnight highway. Its brake lights flickered suddenly, making my chest tighten. I tapped my own brakes, instinctively giving it space. That's when it hit me. There was no license plate, just two empty screws where one should have been. The car slowed, forcing me to slow with it, until I was crawling at 30 miles per hour on a road built for 70. I gritted my teeth, checked my mirrors, and decided to pass. I eased into the left lane, my car pulling alongside theirs. And in that moment, when I glanced through their window, the hair on my arms rose stiff. Because there was no driver, no one behind the wheel. The sedan drifted perfectly straight, steady as a ghost ship. I swerved, heart leaping into my throat, pulling past the vehicle as quickly as I could. My breaths came shallow, hands trembling on the wheel. I told myself I was hallucinating, that exhaustion was playing tricks. But when I checked the rearview mirror, my blood went cold. The car was still there, and now it was speeding up. The taillights that had once seemed distant now filled my mirror. The grille of that rusting sedan inches from my bumper. I pressed harder on the accelerator, but so did it. No matter how fast I went, it clung to me, headlights glaring white into the cabin. I took the next exit without thinking, tires squealing as I careened onto a smaller county road. My heart pounded as I risked a glance. The sedan followed. Its lights locked onto me like eyes in the dark. I whipped through turns, trying to lose it, the road narrowing to gravel and then dirt. Every instinct screamed at me to keep going, not to stop, not to let it catch me. Then, without warning, the lights vanished. I slammed the brakes, tires skidding. Silence pressed in from all sides. My headlights cut a lonely cone into the trees, but the road behind me was empty. No car, no glow, nothing but the steady chirp of crickets and the thundering of my pulse. I sat there, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles whitened. Had I shaken it? Did it turn off somewhere along the way? My phone buzzed on the seat beside me, the screen lighting up with a number I didn't recognize. Against better judgment, I answered, my voice shaking. Hello? Silence. Then, faintly, the sound of static, followed by something else, the crunch of tires on gravel. My eyes darted to the mirror, and there it was, the sedan crawling out of the darkness, headlights dead now, rolling silently toward me. I dropped the phone, slammed the car into gear, and tore forward. Branches clawed at the sides as I barreled down the dirt road, not caring where it led, only that I put distance between myself and it. But no matter how fast I went, I could hear it. Not see, hear. The groan of its old engine, the crunch of its tires, always just behind me, breathing down my neck like a predator savoring the chase. I burst from the woods onto another stretch of highway, the world opening up into black horizon again. For a fleeting second, I thought I'd escaped. Until
The dash lights flickered. Then the radio sputtered alive, though I hadn't touched it. Static roaring before a voice seeped through. Low, male, drawn out, like each word was carved from stone.
Don't look back. My chest seized. The wheel wobbled in my grip. The voice repeated, louder this time, distorted by static. Don't look back. I couldn't resist. My eyes flicked to the rear view, and I saw it. Not the sedan, but a face, pressed against the inside of my back window, pale and grinning, eyes wide with a hunger that didn't belong to anything human. I screamed, swerving wildly, nearly losing control. When I dared look again, the face was gone. So was the sedan. The road stretched empty, silent once more. I didn't stop, not until dawn painted the horizon and traffic began to return. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I sat there shaking, watching the world bathe itself in light, convincing myself it was over. But that night, as I went to lock my front door, I noticed something that made my blood turn to ice. 2 damp footprints on the floorboards, leading from the entryway to the window overlooking my driveway, and etched faintly into the condensation on the glass as though traced by a finger were the same words I'd heard through the radio. Don't look back.
That's all for this story. I hope this helped calm your racing mind and put you in a sleepy mood. Sweet dreams. See you next time.